Whenever you talk to somebody who's really passionate about China, you always learn something that you didn't know. And today I was talking with Gary Livermore of the Source Group. And he tells me that the sense of humour of Australians and of Chinese is very similar. We laugh at the same jokes. And that gives us an enormous advantage over the Americans and even some of the Europeans who have a totally different sense of humour structure. And what he's saying is, look, our manufacturers, our service providers, our accountants, our lawyers, the Chinese are wanting these services and they like to get them from Australians. And there's a whole raft of new opportunities which will open up for our service sector in China if we're smart enough to take advantage of it. Gary, you spend a lot of time dealing with Chinese enterprises. The slowdown in China, do you think this will affect the prices of coal and other commodities in the next year or so?
I think it has to. It has to. If manufacturing is going to slow down because of the lack of demand from the United States and from Europe, then there's going to be a lesser demand for energy. So I think it does have to impact on the commodity prices. I guess it's all completely dependent upon how long this slowdown, this recession is going to go for.
You sell coal to China. Do you source that from Australia or from other places?
Well, actually, we've been sourcing it from Indonesia. We've just signed an agreement with a large state-owned enterprise in China to source coal. They've commissioned us to go out and find coal for them. This is the first time that they've imported coal from anywhere else in the world. They've mainly just imported it a little from Mongolia, but mostly internally. So they're unfamiliar with importing coal from overseas.
Now, is Indonesian thermal coal cheaper than Australian thermal coal?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
By how much?
Well, it depends, but and it's you have to really compare apples with apples. And the Australian thermal coal and Australian coal in general is a very high quality coal. A lot of the coal that we're importing is of lesser quality, and it's going to some of the country regions within China where they're happy to accept a lower quality coal. But if we're to compare apples with apples, it's probably 10-15% cheaper. You must remember that Indonesia is the biggest exporter of thermal coal in the world.
Where do you think the opportunities lie in exporting to China? Apart from, like we all know about iron ore and coal and things like that, but
yeah.
Are there other opportunities that are going to arise in the next few years?
In consulting services in expertise, in manufacturing, engineering, international law, international finance, etc. And there's so much written about the demand that China has for expert services. So I really think from an Australian perspective, it's going to be accessing the Chinese market and providing those services.
When you say manufacturing services, don't they already have the expertise to do that?
The large multinational, international companies do. Yes, they do. They're working on best practice, and that's how we went to China. We set up the engineering department for Glaxo Wellcome in China in 1998. But in terms of the Chinese-owned companies and the state-owned enterprises, no, they don't. They throw a lot of money at things. There's a lot of waste. They're inefficient. So it's implementing these best management practices into these Chinese and these state-owned enterprises. And plus, there's a big shift to from multinationals, international companies, to establish themselves in China to access the Chinese market. And they want to implement best practice. They need Western Chinese thinking people to help them implement best practice into their facilities in China.
Are they nervous about dealing with Americans on this area? Do we have an advantage as Australians?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. There does seem to be a disconnect, particularly at a political, bureaucratic level. The Chinese really do like Australians. They do, and I believe that we have a lot of common characteristics and traits.
Do we?
We laugh at the same things.
Really?
We do.
What do we laugh at?
Our jokes seem to be transferable to the Chinese. They really do.
I suppose tourism will be a huge market.
Correct. I think some of the more fragmented, smaller markets, such as the wine industry, I see we're the third largest exporter of wine to the Chinese market in terms of volume, but in terms of dollar value, we're equal with Chile. Okay, so I think we've got a fair bit that we can offer in the wine industry and those smaller industries.
Thanks, Gary.
Pleasure.